Уважаемые коллеги,
Well, colleagues, let's get started. As our experts and speakers are all available, they are all here, and it's full house now. Yeah, please give your big hand to yourself. Once again, my congratulations to the Financier Day, our holiday. Yesterday, the Prime Minister said that we could do it every day after the holiday, so that's what we're going to do. I'm happy to see you all at our panel discussion. Many familiar faces, and this is not our first time. Our discussions were pretty active and interesting, and we used to discuss hot topics at previous roundtables related to the change of budget legislation with regard to the state oversight. And this July, there was a bill adopted, number 199, that provides for a lot of novelties and changes that we have to make true, which is the new approach to financial audit and financial control. I think that this mechanism has become more transparent and clear, and I think that it's going to be even more effective. The state fiscal control authorities have expanded their remit because now we have to exercise control over accounting, state programs, agreements. Procurement control is available in our budget code now with regard to the delivery of state contracts. So lots of interesting new things that expand our activities. There is a single list of regulations for the state control. Federal standards are to be developed. This is a serious thing, a new thing we have to discuss, and we have to develop those regulations together. And an interesting tool is the access rights to any information systems to ensure state financial control. And now our panel discussion is going to be about new modern approaches to financial control and financial audit. And we will discuss issues that are still outstanding. There are a few of them. First, next expansion of the state fiscal control and state audit. Second, not very good coherence between internal control services. Third, issues for municipal control. Four, too much formalization of state financial control. And number five, which is persisting for many years now, these are the action plans for after control measures. We're now attended by representatives from key authorities that shape the control and audit environments. Our speakers are Deputy Minister of Finance of Russia Alexei Lavrov, Accounts Chamber Auditor Tatiana Blinova, Director for Budget Methodology and Financial Reporting Department of Ministry of Finance Sergei Romanov, Deputy Head of the Federal Treasury Eli Isayev, and Chairman of the St. Petersburg City Financial Control Alexander Zhukov. Well, colleagues, our session is for 90 minutes, but if the discussion is intense, we could extend that time. So our format today is a little bit different. We're not going to have classic presentations, and all speakers are going to talk about hot topics that I have just briefly mentioned. So your timing is 5 minutes per speaker. And next, I would like to have an interactive dialogue with the audience. So every hot topic is going to be having a Q&A session, and we want to hear from you. You may have another opinion, so you're welcome. In the second part of the round table, I would ask the colleagues about the future of the state financial audit and state financial control. What is the way forward? But there is a good start for today's round table. It is a tradition that there is certificate of merit that goes to the members of professional community who have done a good job this year in terms of state financial or fiscal control and audit. And I would like to have on stage Alexei Lavrov to present and award those certificates. The Moscow Financial Forum Diploma 2019 for effective fiscal control in the region is awarded to the head of Main Fiscal Directorate of Omsk Oblast, Talgat Shalobayev. A certificate of merit for the contribution of the regulatory activities of fiscal control in Russia is awarded to the acting Minister of Internal Fiscal Control of Orenburg Oblast, Nikolai Boganin. A Moscow Financial Forum Diploma for young professionals is awarded to the consultant of the budgetary department of Tula Oblast, Finance Ministry, Kristina Safronova. The next diploma of the Forum for Young Professionals is awarded to the leading expert of the budgetary department of Sorochinsk Urban District of Orenburg Oblast, Yekaterina Rupina. By taking this opportunity, I would like to extend my thanks to the support of young professionals by the Russian Union of Financial People, to Larissa Yeroshkina, and to you. Well, colleagues, all good things are over now, but I hope the next section is going to be even more pleasant, so let's switch to the main topics of the agenda. The first question to discuss that I want to raise is the expansion of the state fiscal control remit, as well as the extension of the range for state financial audit. Because now we are having, we are not only discovering problems related to the budget regulations, but also other types of wrongdoings in terms of accounting, urban construction, and labor code, without which it is not possible to understand the root cause or to make an recommended practice to ensure effective budget spending and their safekeeping. And I would like to have Tatiana to tell a few words. What is the position of the Accounts Chamber in terms of the expansion or extension of the range of the state financial fiscal audit remit? Thank you, Alexander. I would like to congratulate you on the occasion, to wish you all the best in your career and your families. As far as the expansion of the fiscal audit, I believe there are a few things that we need to resolve. Any system which is not developing is going to die, and we are part of that system, and we have to always move that system forward and develop it. I think that the previous session, where Roman Artuchin was telling about the lines of activities of the Federal Treasury, is a good example on how the state agency is incentivizing the development of a certain institution. So the statutory regulation and the fiscal control is needed. Taken into account of elements of that system that we have, this is internal financial control, internal financial audit, the internal and external public fiscal control. All those elements are linked somehow. Whatever, it's clear that there should be no stagnation in development. We can see how the budgetary regulation develops, as well as the updated budgetary code this August. We didn't have enough time to switch from the statutory regulation to enforcement practice, but this is a certain stage of development. We shouldn't forget about this. But at the same time, there are issues, as we see, with regard to the delineation of authorities between the levels of fiscal control. And how could we organize certain interaction, and how do we use the results? And I think that these are the bullet points that we want to discuss during that session. But for all those present, it's clear to develop the system. I think that those who are being controlled, we are on the same page with you, I think. Alexei. Thank you, Tatiana. Alexei, Tatiana has voiced up the Accounts Chamber opinion, but what do you think as a regulator of that system? Should we continue expanding these authorities, and how can we do that in the legal field? Before we talk about the expansion, we need to know the novelties that have been introduced recently, which is the reduced authorities of the Treasury in terms of fiscal control, and that significantly increased or simplified that methodology. A few years ago, we were talking about the preliminary control, current control, and follow-up. And the current fiscal control was canceled. Like, I'm controlling a car, and the controller is telling me that you pushed the pedals so hard. It's not possible. And the preliminary control is a little bit tricky thing, but the real thing is the follow-up control, and this is a very right movement in the right direction. So the control field has been significantly reduced. On the other side, we proposed to mention the control domain. It comes with practice, because financial controllers discover a lot of wrongdoings. They try to prevent them, but they're said, hey guys, why do you go into the social security issues or payments? You don't have this remit. And it all stays the same. It doesn't get better. People are not happy, and the money is spent in vain. And we have suggested that it should be changed, because it's not only the budgetary legislation has to be is the domain of state control, and other regulations as well, still limited by the public regulations, which is about 90% of all, wrongdoing. So I think that it's not a problem to expand it to other branches of law. And procurement control is now also within our authority. It was the same controller was doing fiscal control and procurement control, and this is a fight that can last forever. So now it is clearly said in the budget code how should it be done. As far as the control objects, we're trying to say that our assets are controlled by us by default, because we are in charge of state institutions, unitary companies, and so on. It stays the same. However, there is the so-called Treasure Support Institute that has arisen, that has been made in recent times, and we have to think that there are probably cases when business entities agree to being controlled in a tougher way, but it's only natural. If you don't want to be controlled so hard, you shouldn't get state subsidies. Next point is the subject matter of control. This topic is a little bit deeper and it's not clear. For instance, all construction people say that the facility has been handed over, quality is good, but you bought bricks twice as cheaper and concrete twice as more expensive. The question is, should we limit just by the abidance of all technical parameters, or should we have another subject matter like proportion of those things to be used? There is a very first significant step to remove this situation in budget code. The project documentation, it was not possible to control it before because it's a legacy limits that's very hard to apply now in the project documentation. So now they used to define the overall cost of facility, and they do it. But the market is not there. It's not possible to procure materials for that price. But anyway, a contractor can violate something. But if there is a cost estimate, it's better if there is a cost estimate to build something, because it can be amended, it can take into account regional specifics. However, sooner or later there is a question: if we get a facility and if it fits into the regulations, do we need to care what is the proportion of components and for how much they have been spent? We need to oversee the final facility, the final thing. So now that subject matter of control is pretty wide. It has no limits, and on the one side we are expanding this control, and we need to think that if we can make it narrower, but we need to define, like here it's okay for a controller to go, here it's not allowed. Ali, I can see that you are ready to fight, because Alexei has touched upon two major things that are very sensitive for those who work in the ground. The first is that the exclusion of business entities only meeting checks, and the second point is new changes in the urban code. What do you think? How do we check now under those circumstances? Thank you. Thank you, Evgeny. If it were that easy as Alexei has said, it would have been different. But thanks a lot to Alexei, Tatiana, and Sergei that the dialogue is there in terms of improvement and expansion of that control domain. It was not possible to do 6 to 7 years ago. And you probably keep that letter, Alexei, that I wrote you at that time, because I, as a controller, was happy with the then budget code construct. And that letter was based on the fact that I would ask an access to your IT resources, and I got an answer from the Ministry of Finance and the Treasury. You have to be allowed that by law, and then you get this access. And now this legal basis is there, and for the last 3 years we have paid a lot of time to improve that thing, because this is the age of digitalization, and we shouldn't stay where we are. And those of us who want to, those guys who want to do any harm, they're not standing still. On the one side, we are expanding this remit or domain of control, which is already in the bill of law. The aim is to expand authorities of the fiscal agencies to prevent wrongdoing or damage to the budgetary system of the Russian Federation.
The budgetary system of the Russian Federation. On the one side, we fulfill this task by regulating our fiscal activities. On the other hand, we have many problems, but I believe that in the nearest future we will solve this problem when we can apply the response measures only to participants of the budgetary process. What about non-participants? Hundreds of millions of rubles, non-budgetary funds. Thank you for understanding. Alexei, I believe that in the nearest future we will have an opportunity to resolve this problem. The second issue is about changes, the latest changes in the urban code, where the new rules were adopted. Alexei says that he agrees with these changes, and being a controller, I can tell you that there are many examples which we see during our inspections, and inside the Treasury we call it financial investigation, because we are inventing new methods. State financial control should conduct financial investigation. We see violations from both consumer and provider. And the rules say that the calculation is made on the basis of the calculation regulations in order to provide it to the Commission. What about the method, the methodology, instructions? Instructions say that it can be determined on the analysis of the situation on the market with principles of optimization and justification. It's a market. And in this sphere, we see violations. We provided an opportunity to form the price on the basis of the calculation norms, but transactions between customer and provider are on the basis of the agreement of the contract. When you can justify the expenditures, and after that we came to with inspections, the result was achieved, but with smaller amounts than it was declared to the controlling body. Hundreds of kilometers of cable laid and equipment, and we returned about 600 million rubles to the budget. Another example of misuse or even abusing VAT when we have so-called free price. What is the basis? Is it analysis of the market situation? We often face new problems and other problems when the executors, providers, provide calculations with prices which are 10 times more than the real price. And we controllers, we inspectors, we do not have an opportunity to respond, and the customer doesn't have an opportunity to return money because the contract is signed. And how we can fight, how we can overcome this problem, this impediment with consumers, customers, and the damage which is a result of such actions and violations. I will not take much time. I was thinking about that even without consideration of financial forum. I have been working on that for more than 2 weeks, and I am writing a letter which I'm going to submit. To my point of view, the problem today is not solved even by the rules and regulations, which even with consideration of all the changes made. Yes, we understand that there should be treasury support, rated cost, rated profitability. It's not the correct example. The market price, there is a competitive situation. If you make your price lower, or maybe it's a new technology, you never know. There is a facility that has to be commissioned. I believe that we have an excess of control. That is why we have competition. We do not have lower prices. Which person will follow the expertise, the regulations? Nobody knows the real situation in the market. If there are such experts, there would be no work in other places with higher salary, because everything should be in correspondence with the regulations which were adopted long ago, and the structure of price is not met when designing project documentation. You said that there is abuse. There is a price, the contract price, so the price should not be higher than this. And what happens between these parties of the contract? The last example which I mentioned with the construction of a highway, the damage was 1.2 billion rubles. The price of the contract was exceeded? No, it was not exceeded, but the price was determined without consideration of the real price. Actually, the customer should determine the price. The customer should control it, not you. We have providers which are also designers. It's another question. You just doubt. We shall write that in typical contracts, templates, or in the federal law number 44. The rules are respected only in case all the scope of work is performed. And number 2, considering justification, if all the prices are considered, because responsibility for pricing does not belong to expertise, to experts. All the responsibility is undertaken by customer. If we reveal, if we investigate it and find violations, it's another case. I believe that it's a very serious problem. We shall understand that it's serious, that there are many real cases. Tatiana, please, if you allow me. I should take part in such an interesting discussion. What financial control means? It's one of the elements of the system of governance. If we talk about the system of governance in general, we shall be concerned on how efficient we invest any budgetary funds. That is why the position of every person, to my point of view, I understand the price setting, target setting, orientation, focus of the financial system for achieving better results with less resources spent, with higher efficiency. It's obvious for all of us. That is why the system should be adjusted on this basis, excluding some powers and providing some rights and powers to other institutions. Treasury support has not disappeared. It's just one of the forms. It's just transformed to the routine, everyday process. We delegated that. The shape has changed, but the content and actions are still the same. That is why, in general, I believe that the debates on do we need to develop financial control system from the point of view of results, which is better efficiency of the budgetary investment, I believe that all of us obviously will answer this question the same way. That is why we need consolidation of all the levels of financial control structures, including all the tools, institutions, which we have established. Development of the tools of digital technologies which would support us, which would facilitate, considering the market conditions, to determine and to form the pricing on procurement for public needs. It's a very complicated situation, to be honest with you. On the other hand, we need to establish this system of management which will allow us to make very clear managerial decisions aimed at improving efficiency. I believe that we have touched upon very interesting issue. I would like the audience to participate. Please, 2 brief comments. Who would like to comment on that topic, please? Deputy Head of the Federal Treasury. Probably she would support Mr. Isaev. It's a very... Should I support one of you? You made my job even harder. I would introduce myself. I'm a deputy head, a colleague of Mr. Isaev. And recently we had another field, control of the supervisory work, when we inspect procurement, not the complex of the economic activities as Mr. Isaev does. So we separately control and review and inspect procurement activities, and we find problems in regulation in order to form that regulations. I would probably just tell a brief comment. I agree with you about competitive environment of the market, where we have the competitive environment and where the price was decreased after the tender, after the competition. It's not correct from our point of view to interfere the policy of any company, of any enterprise. In this case, they will have to provide the justifications and evidence to explain why the bridge construction costed that amount of money but not this amount of money. In these cases, we have contracts which are concluded on the non-tender basis. We know that such suppliers the practice shows us that the initial price was determined by the future provider, unique IT projects, unique construction sites. I am dealing with that. I know that there is no market there. And it's only formal compliance with the regulations when you receive all the offers. And when we ask, how did you determine the price? So it was just a survey of the market, and the telecommunication company, for example, who is a provider of services, and when we ask, how did you determine the price? On the basis of a survey, we just calculated it because this provider, this contractor knows everything about cable, and the customers, they don't always have all the necessary skills, all the necessary competence. And when we have a cross inspections, we ask to tell the structure of expenses, and there are some options. Number one, I will not show you. Well, actually, there is an obligation to show. I will show you, but not everything, and we will never know that. And number three, the contractor doesn't understand what we want from him. I do not have any account balance. I have a subsidiaries for one project, I have a budget for another project, and it is his right, because it is his economy of his company. We want to understand the nature of the price, not to punish everybody, not to fine everybody. We will find all the mistakes, all the typos you made. We will beat you. You are not in compliance with one regulation. The rate was wrong. Why did you apply the factor of 40, not 60? Where are the rules? We have no rules. And in this non-competitive sphere, to my point of view, the situation is very complicated. How to provide the accounting balance, how to understand the contractuals. Shall there be norm and any rate of profitability or not? Brief comment, I remind you, I would agree with the fact that we should not interfere. But in case when we have a contractor who calculated the price, we shall somehow elaborate rules for the controllers. Thank you very much. Brief comment, please. Otherwise, we will not respect timing. Brief comment on the discussion. I have to tell you that two opponents that we have, both are right. I would support Alexei. Today, we have to move towards efficiency. Efficiency at implementation of every product means to build high-quality facility, to purchase a better product, better goods for a lower price. But Mr. Isaev is also right, because he's asking how we achieved that. He wants to see that it was a fair price and that the quality was good. To my point of view, I believe that Alexei, who says that we decided not to use the primary control and it was a big deal, I believe it's too early to declare that. Going away from that, we have divided the process into two steps. Because my colleague said that nobody is responsible for price which are included in the project design documentation. That is why let us have two stages. Number one is inspection. The controller should check volumes and qualitative parameters. After that, there will not be additional questions. You are right. We shall also respect the situation on the market and the consumer. It's his objective to build a quality facility with all respecting all the parameters of project documentation and as cheap as possible. In this case, the construction industry will develop. It will attract new technologies, and we will have a transparency. That would be my comment. Thank you, Mikhail. Problem in this sphere exists, and we see that, according to the comments of our colleagues, we need to additionally examine this issue, especially in construction industry, because we face these problems every day. It's not only pricing, it's the procedure itself, how we're doing it. When we have the conclusion of the expert commission, after that design documentation is adopted, the price goes down. How can a miracle happen? Then the contractor has to decrease the price by 20–30%. How can the contractor do that? To decrease the price for labor, job is not finished, the materials quality is lower, etc. Yes, that's correct. It's just cheaper labor for higher prices. There are many problems. Today, as a controller, I tell you that what we want is a transparent market, but we cannot achieve it at the moment. A brief comment, please. Yes. I would like to summarize it. Just, it's not the end of the session, that is why. Please, just a brief comment. Regulators, in any debate, in any conflict, there are two sides. And we are talking not about control. What we are talking about is that there is a battlefield in the procurement, lack of instructions, lack of regulations, conditions of... Maybe we should give some weapon to a controller. If we do not control it, everything will be bad. And the regulator regulates approaches to the organization of the procedure of control. And we cannot use lack of something as a basis. We say that there is expertise bodies, we should increase the efficiency, but we say that they do not understand anything. I am a controller. I do not need the results of that inspection because I am a controller myself. No documents, no instructions. Instructions is bad, but it doesn't have to do anything with control. We need to provide the controlling body with an opportunity to fulfill their obligations, their powers within the position from the point of view of efficiency of budget spending. But that doesn't mean that we have to open all the doors and say that everything is bad here. Controller, you are the first and the last hope. You can go and do whatever.
Discussions at various platforms on how to organize the mechanism of mutual just confirmation, how to exclude duplication of actions, how to align our methodologies as the single system is an important thing, and it's related to the how to say the whole system of the Russian audit and oversight system that we're trying to make. I would like to Ali Isaev to be the first speaker. How do you feel that problem? How do we streamline that mutual confirmation, and what do you think are the steps? The financial supervision authorities are specified in law. There is the federal internal and external control, and whatever is not in the law is the interaction between those two bodies of control. According to the law, they have different authorities, but as far as effectiveness and efficiency of their interaction, believe me, colleagues, this is there and will always be. I used to be part of Russian financial oversight when Sergei Stepashin was the head of it, and we started interaction with the accounts chamber, and then it stopped. And now, when Alexei Kudrin is head of the accounts chamber, we have good interaction between internal and external audit systems. Tatiana and Alexei, many thanks to the auditors of the accounts chamber, we realized that necessity for cooperation from the very beginning. Alexei Kudrin was aware of that problem, and now we have been trying to fight it using our agreements and setting up a single action team. There is a redundancy problem. There is a mutual confirmation problem. There is mutual, how to say, qualification, prorated qualification of what we discover. There is an issue of how to classify those wrongdoings. A single classifier is missing, and moreover, in the information age, when all, state agencies know that we have to switch to the next level in terms of information technology and to do all things, both budgetary and non-budgetary, into the single system, that interaction is needed. Risk maps, exchange of information. And moreover, I would say we made an even further step with the accounts chamber. This is shared projects, joint audits. And Tatiana is part of our team, and we have been delivering in one project with her. And Svetlana Orlova is the same thing, 2 projects with her. And trust me, there is a good impact from both checks. So that interaction, Evgeny, is needed, I believe, not only at the federation level as we did via agreements and setting up teams, but it should be made at the regional level. The most important thing, colleagues, is to remove redundancy. There should be trust, not only internal and external federal audit, but even within the system between an internal auditor and external auditor and an internal fiscal controller from the state. And that would make a breakthrough. And those tools that are available today to the Federal Treasury, believe me, I want to make a trace, to leave something behind me in terms of prevention, that those things using that cooperation rather than trying to collect money afterwards from bad guys, contractors who don't comply. Thank you. Tatiana, what do you think about this? How effective is today's cooperation between your agencies, and what has to be done to make it more effective? It is needed. Ali Abubakarovich has already mentioned that our activities this year marked 2 examples of joint interaction with the federal authority, and somehow the object is the same, and a few questions that we're going to work on, and we have how to say, delineated authority between ourselves, the goals and objectives of that work. And I think that we were able to clearly fit them into the authorities that are inherent in the Federal Treasury and the Accounts Chamber. So we do understand that the deliverables under certain supervisory activities are not only based on just confirmation or non-confirmation. They are based on the fact how similar tools we have, how similar standards do we have during fiscal controlling, and what are the goals of those things, of those actions. So we have clearly delineated the remit between the Federal Treasury, and we do hope on them, but at the same time, we have a certain scope within our remit to use the results of our colleagues' work. But I think that the major problem that we're facing is the very first and the very important step, which is planning. Up until now, to my regret, under the statute, there are no rules under the statute, under law, that would incentivize correlation between each other for the next actions and to synchronize them somehow in terms of using mutual resources and opportunities. This is probably the first time that the Federal Treasury has sent a draft action plan for the next year to the Accounts Chamber, and that is happening exactly at the time when the new plans for the next year are drafted at the Accounts Chamber. We were able to see that the Federal Treasury is planning to, well, I would say that we have noted what are the actions for the next year from the Treasury, and we are trying to streamline our plans accordingly. As a source of risk-based approaches, if a single problem is regarded in the same way by the two controlling bodies, this is a good benchmark for either combining forces or bringing it to the next level. I mean, the status of the event that is planned. We know that two risk-based approaches that gave certain results in a certain area is a need for those things to be done. I think that our future success with regard to cooperation is about planning. I hope that this first step would allow us to coordinate efforts to say how, in which cases, to confirm it going forward. And as far as the agreement between the Accounts Chamber and the Federal Treasury is concerned, in terms of our planning coordination, so the work has started, and I hope it will move on, and we will have a real tool. So we're testing each other, we're trying to adapt to each other, and I hope that we will like each other even more. Alexei, there is no more effective results, and the governmental fiscal body would share the same fiscal controlling events and would have a shared result. So I believe that it would be positive. Alexei, my question goes to you. Tatiana has touched upon a question that cooperation synchronization efforts are being streamlined. However, there is no law in this area. And the question is, do we need this statutory regulation? And will it be reflected in the new version of the budgetary code? As Tatiana has said, that there would be a single risk system that was mentioned by Roman some time ago. So what can you comment on this? I may sound skeptical in terms of cooperation and cancellation. This is all good, but as one person said, in terms of before we unite, we can divide. We have to divide first. Only those bodies can unite that have clear principles. But if you say that it's pretty much the same and we should unite, why shouldn't you unite as it's already the same, everything is the same in your organizations? Well, it is internal and external fiscal control, but what happened? Both internal and accounts chamber are external for the major objects of control. So that object of control doesn't care who came to them to check. They say the accounts chamber would come to check us, and then the treasury would come to check me. We need to align our plans not to go there twice. That would not be bad. But still, if the subject matter is the same, one body would be sufficient instead of two. I think that the question is that fiscal bodies, they are moving towards audit, which is figures supported. Every budget, the state budget is checked every year by the accounts chamber, and the amount of wrongdoings found every year is reducing by 15 to 20%. So that is a very effective work, and well, it's like when Ali checks first and then the accounts chamber checks it twice, they say that it's fine, and the accounts chamber in this case can act as an external controller, and those budgetary documents and analytics. This is what fiscal authorities should do. Does it mean that they cannot take part in the checks? They can, and the check and inspection is not just to pay the damage, but to diagnose the case, to find something that was done in the wrong way, and to penalize. In this case, everything would be good. Every agency would have its mission, and there will be certainly exchange of information. We probably have to think about a classical triad: federal audit, even not financial, federal budgetary control, or municipal budgetary control, because all financial controls can be for customs, for currency, and internal control, not exactly financial. So financial, not financial, is artificial barriers, and if we arrive in such shared philosophy, then we can think how to get it described in law. It is not described now. It's not too bad. Everybody is trying to do the job, even without it being reflected in the law. Because if we are too proactive, we would make the situation even worse. We have to exchange information while during shared events, but still we have to go far apart by functions, by mission, by goals and objectives. So every authority, every agency is having its own tasks, goals, and objectives that we're trying to have. I think that there would never be a case when the federal treasury would put a task to increase a share of strategic audit as a result of the federal treasury. It's unrealistic. But we're discussing cooperation, and a remit of every one of us is defined. Do we cross, or do we overlap? Yes, we do. Can we streamline a system, the overlapping system, to exclude redundancy? Yes, we can. Why not? This is the so-called, the job has been started. Can we use each other's results in terms of familiarizing with the Federal Treasury reports, and those guys can get familiar with our analytical control fiscal reports? Yes, we can. It would mutually beneficial cooperation. Can we set up tools to allow us to identify certain wrongdoings? Should we have a single classifier someday? We can discuss it, and that could give a certain effect. Such cooperation is key, and that goes without saying, in my opinion. As Alexei has said, we need to separate the area where we live, and then we can get married. All right, any comments from the auditorium? Ministry of the Caucasus Development of Russia. I'm responsible for the fiscal audit. I think the cooperation between external fiscal control and internal fiscal control should be aligned like that. Every finance ministry department has a inspection of the accounts chamber for the previous year and for the next year. More often, the accounts chamber members don't go down to the regions, and the federal treasury could have a higher level control on the ground. We, for instance, make an agreement for subsidies to the regions. The standard agreement just has a wording that the local financial controllers have its power, but we cannot go to the on site to check it. And in case of any deficiency, if the accounts chamber would share its information with the treasury or vice versa, the accounts chamber could have a better control on the ground about the subsidies that we have sent to the regions.
Other comments, colleagues? I would disagree with what you said about the better performing of work in the treasury. The treasury officials do everything as you should do. You have powers for internal control, internal audit, and you are responsible for the target-focused, efficient application of these subsidies allocated by the government. That is why it should not be a collective. It should be individual in accordance with the powers of authorities and the bodies of state financial control. I would like to give a remark. We have two different federal treasury. We have federal treasury and we have accounts chamber. Probably you could have a dialogue and you could cooperate and interact, which will make us happy as well. As for the regional account chambers and regional financial bodies, we shall notice that they are very diverse. In every entity of the Russian Federation, they have their own target setting, and they are formed by the representative body of the government. We shall elaborate any unified standard for cooperation with external controllers. It will be a very difficult task, and the only way to solve this problem, to my point of view, if we visit one facility, there should be two authorities at the same time. For example, if we conduct an inspection to the federal fiscal body, and we need to make a conclusion how to avoid violations and how to avoid these violations not in the future. In this case, we'll have a synergy effect, and in this case, it will be useful, especially on the regional level, in the sphere of cooperation with external control. We do not have the situation when we will set the same goals, and raise the same questions. We have differences in formulation, in wording of issues and questions. The share of efficiency strategic audit is provided for in the program. That is why we have these small differences. If you have different targets, if you have different objectives, there should probably be analytic recommendations to bodies of control. Allow me to recall that the decree, that the instruction on the results of is not issued. No, we do not issue it, and the accounts chamber does not issue this report. Not analytical, but the audit. Do you provide report? If it's a control event, yes, we provide a report, we issue a report. You should say that everything is bad, the laws are not obeyed, catch those who violate. The major part of the content of the accounts chamber includes the recommendations to the regulators or to financial fiscal bodies in regard of the fiscal legislation, and the legislative acts which are changed as a result of the control events increase every year. Dear colleagues, let us move forward. I believe that we have other topics to discuss, but we have timing. which we have to respect. And the next topical issue is municipal financial control. Statistics of the Federal Treasury, which annually provides analysis of the performance of municipal authorities. The situation is improving step by step. Nevertheless, more than 3,000 municipalities do not conduct control events, and they do not fulfill their obligation. Even on the experience of Moscow, which we are witnessing, those municipalities which established bodies of internal financial control do not perform such activities. I would like to ask Sergei Romanov, as a methodologist, could you please tell us what is your opinion on this problem? What is the solution? Probably we shall change something in the legislation to transfer powers to the level of the entity of the Russian Federation and take other measures in order to make this tool work. If we see the actual scheme, we have a constitution, we have a constitutional law, which nowadays determines the powers of the local self-governing bodies on the regional level and what shall be executed by this level, this historical situation on each of the territories, etc. The same is determined by the law number 131. The budgetary expenses are exclusive responsibility and obligation of municipality, and other normative of this law determines the procedure. The procedure should be set by the budget code, and the budget code stipulates that control on budget execution is performed by the authorities of local administration or municipality or financial bodies of the entity or local administration. Powers belong to municipal authorities and special control authority of the municipal level. This is what we have today. Before 2003, the budget code provided for powers which belong only to financial authority. Nobody was responsible in the municipality because there was special body. The control bodies on that level were not comprehensive at that time because the controlling authorities as a separate body within, as a part of the financial authority, financial body on the level of the region, on the level of municipalities, and on the level of separate districts. There were some controlling department on the level of settlements and small municipalities. There was nothing like this. Why? Because they had no budgets. They had just calculations. They did not have any controlling bodies. The region could have a budget. It was divided 50 to 50%. No budget, no controlling body. In 2003, that is why we returned back when the law number 131 was adopted. It provided for the strict normative that each municipality should have municipal brackets local budget. As soon as we have this regulation, as soon as we have this budget, we have the authority which is controlling that. It's logic, and in the very beginning it seemed to be correct because we divided the powers, we divided the responsibilities, we formed authorities for every territorial entity for implementation of all of these powers, and since that we have municipal authorities. If we take a look at what's happening today, analysis of implementation of powers on municipal control conducted by external part Accounts Chamber, Federal Treasury, which has a separate objective in this sphere, it confirms, it proves once again that municipal control is a subject of high risk. First of all, for the entities of the Russian Federation, because we cannot talk about normal control. The resource that they have, professional resource, and control is growing, and people should have special skills, special professional expertise. We have only few people. I'm not talking about all the municipalities, but I'm talking about the majority of municipalities. Budgets of municipalities do not provide financial resource to the necessary extent. That is why it's either functioning, malfunctioning, or does not function at all, which means that a certain volume of budget is beyond the sphere of control by federal agencies. There is entity which works, which has budget, because the major part of the budget are the funds of the regions. In this situation, probably it would be correct to go back to formation of this structure and to think on how we can solve this problem. There are no so many options, softer option and some other option. We should not invent additional control body. We should do it in a soft way to provide powers to municipalities and entities of the Russian Federation to delegate these powers to the level of an entity. That would probably be correct for those who do not have their own resources. Option number 3, which is also possible, because in every municipality we have a controlling accounting body. Accounts chamber is the state audit brackets control, but the controlling bodies, it's only for control, not audit. From the point of view of legislation, it's one of its obligations, analysis, efficiency, but audit is not applicable to this. Especially directly, they do not conduct audits. They perform control, and for high dotation municipalities, it's not their objective, it's their obligation in accordance with the budget code to perform such control. That is why if we need first to divide, then to unite, on this level we probably do not need these two branches, internal and external. Maybe one is enough. Probably that would be one of the options of development of the situation. We need to understand what is the attitude, what do regions think about that. They believe that these powers should belong to them completely. And they have reasons, they have justifications for that. This is how the situation looks at the moment. Mr. Romanov prepared the floor for Alexander. Being a practitioner, being a person from St. Petersburg, from the controlling body, do you know that problem exists? Yes, I agree absolutely that we have to go back to the situation which we had before 2003. Which controlling bodies should municipalities have? Accounts, controlling bodies, in accordance with the Federal Law 44, plus additional state financial control body. We have municipal, we have settlements, we have villages with population of 300 people. Do they really need a budget? Do they have budget of 1 million rubles a year? Do they really need all these account chambers and everything? And they have dotations. We need to check that. We are obliged to check that. And in this case, the entity also controls, but excessive control is not necessary in this situation. At the last financial forum, the government declared such opportunity as of transferring of control from municipal levels to the levels of entities. Regarding budget, its power, it's the unique power of municipalities, but municipalities could share these powers. If we allow to do that, Why do we have to allow that? It should not be obligatory, it should be allowed, because municipalities are different. There are mono cities. The budget, there are budgets like Novosibirsk city budget, which is much bigger than the regional budget. In this case, probably we should decide what to do with this city. And these federal cities in St. Petersburg, for example, there are 111 municipalities which are inside the city. In Moscow, I believe that there are 137. In Sevastopol, there are 10 of them. Internal municipalities, and for them we need to provide for terminology of the budget code, because they cannot be called just municipality. Actually, it's just agglomeration of buildings, which major task is to have a very beautiful yard, to have a heating system, and to have clean streets. We should not apply similar rules to this. It would look weird. This is what we have to take into account when making these changes. That is why yesterday I had a conversation with my colleagues, and today we said that there should be a difference between powers of municipalities. I hope that the colleagues from the audience, would you like to give a comment? When we have an amendment, changes in the constitution of the Russian Federation, we are not talking that we are taking somebody's powers. I'm talking about this because recently, together with the Accounts Chamber, we implemented the changes into the draft law of transfer of powers to the entity, from municipalities to the entities of the Russian Federation. We face the problem that from the legal point of view, these are exceptional powers which cannot be transferred, cannot be concessed. This is what the Ministry of Justice told us, all the institutions. What about outsourcing? In this case, we need to invent the methods of implementation of these exceptional powers. Even the checks, even the audits conducted recently allowed us to understand that, of course, there are some disadvantages. There are different approaches to control events, different performance of these events, but it took place 1 or 2 times, and it's about 30% of all the cases. Municipal financial control included violation. In 95% there were violations. Why do we need this? We overload, we require something, but we understand that it's impossible to implement. That is why I believe that we probably could find the right methods how to implement. Could I add a couple of words? Could you introduce yourself? Vladimir Chayev, Moscow University of Self-Regulated Union. A brief comment, please. There is a system of agreements on dividing of powers and obligations between entities and municipalities. These agreements cover all the spheres of activities of every region, of every entity of the Russian Federation, and it provides for the capacities of each municipality, each region, and there is a ready tool. We just need to use it. And for Russian regions, if we do not want to talk about constitution, there are so-called charters of the regions, and this is a constitution of the entity of the Russian Federation. We have these ready tools, and we need to write down the powers in the sphere of financial control. Example, agreements were revised 2 times. Thank you very much. From some colleagues from the regions, please, would you comment on that? Good afternoon, Kirov region, Deputy Finance Minister. Dear colleagues, of all the options articulated today. Very important, I would highlight transfer of powers to the level of the entity, but there is one thing. The majority of entities have agreements on non-increasing of number of staff, even if we apply some interactive, some new technologies, planning, it will be additional job for controlling authorities. We cannot do that without increasing the number of staff. And today there are certain limitations for the majority of the entities of the Russian Federation. Without this solution, it will be very difficult for us to implement by ourselves these new scopes of work. Could you please give a comment on these two aspects? Can we use the mechanism of agreements or limitations which exist for dotation regions?
Can they be projected on those or not? As far as agreements are concerned, it's not about adaptation or other type. This is the budget loan restructuring for Russian regions, because Russian entities have quite a few authorities. So the question is if the municipal number of municipal officers will be reduced, the number of regional has to be increased, and I don't think that the Ministry of Finance would be against, as this is the same amount of money, because many municipalities are subsidized. What do you think? Let's put that question before the Ministry of Finance, and I don't see a bigger problem here. As far as agreements are concerned, our federation is based on law, and I don't see that those agreements or contracts may be realized in a different way. I don't know such agreements. I cannot hear the question. Well, colleagues, there are no contracts, agreements on delineation of authority. Name one in the financial area. You may just call it in the agricultural industry or something. What is a contract? What is an agreement? It means that one Russian region has some authorities, the other has different, because there should be different agreements. So everything is in the law. Everyone is equal in terms of communication with the federal center. That system used to exist before, but we're now a federation country based on law. There could be an agreement on some technical points, but there shouldn't be a baseline, fundamental delineation of authorities. It used to be before, in the early 2000s. Thank you, Alexei. Let's move on the regional agenda. There is another problem which is there. It is related to the functioning of the internal financial control and internal financial audit. We can see today that the internal fiscal control, organized in many regions of Russia, it's formalized a lot, and there is some artificial tools, logbooks, reports, but at the same time there are no clear understanding on how it works, and the internal fiscal audit is sometimes replaced by internal control. And I would like Sergei to comment on this. What has to be done here? And those changes that amended the budget legislation, would they change the situation greatly? Could we put the internal fiscal audit and internal fiscal audit to the new level? It's already 6 years that the internal fiscal audit and internal fiscal control regulations have been in place. inherent not in institutions but in executive authorities. And there is quite a lot of practice accumulated over 6 years of time, positive and negative. Speaking about a positive experience, the most positive one is that those two systems which exist today, if they work, that minimizes a number of wrongdoings that are going beyond to the external fiscal control. It's much easier for the next controllers to see something, because we in the Ministry of Finance, we can catch a lot of wrongdoings and bad practices that don't go further. But as far as positive things are concerned, this is it, especially for internal fiscal control. There are quite a few, how to say, drawbacks, and this is mainly to one big wrong step under the fiscal control system. The budget code provides internal financial fiscal audit and internal fiscal control as a budgetary authority, and as any budgetary authority, it should have the attributes of this thing, which is the documents, supporting documents, how it should be done, when, the deliverables, and reporting. So there are control maps, control registers, and so on. But at the same time, there is an external control analysis procedure from the auditors, from the accounts chamber, from the treasury. But at the same time, first, we have not set a management system of that budget authority. That budget authority is conducted by certain people, and it is initially positioned as not an internal control but self-control. When I perform my functionality and I oversee myself, so I do something, I make a wrong step, I should put it in the audit log that I made a mistake, and then I have to go forward. So this is the internal self-management. This is not system management, but this is self-management. This is a hot topic that we have. And the second point is that the self-control and the budgetary transaction control is part and parcel of the budget procedure. It's in the system. It is inherent part of any process, like cash expenditure application, reporting, transaction reporting procedure. But it looks like we took it away as a single separate authority and made a separate procedure for it. And then we began adding those attributes to it. Moreover, the control system within transactions has a desire to move away from the people who do it, to be part of the automated system and to have its self-life. Those three hotspots that were in the system brought about the fact that today this control is very formal. Secondly, the reporting is made based on the fact that controllers are not very wanted people. Controllers don't have to do risk management because this is something separate. It should be for those guys who have certain training, like how to prioritize risks, high, low, what happened to it, how to manage risks. But it's not those people who make a cash expenditure application. And this formal approach has made a problem. But on the other side, the internal finance audit, fiscal audit, had its sore points. The first one is the functional independence of fiscal audit. That's right, an auditor should be independent, but it is not easy to do given the amount of resources and organizational design of an executive power, because there should be a separate unit directly subordinate to the executive power head. It is not easy to do. The accounts chambers show that it's a problem. It sits somewhere in the control bodies. There is no direct subordination, and it's not an easy task. We tried to do it. However, those budget code updates are now turning the system towards in the right direction. We removed the internal control definition as a standalone budget authority. Yes, the internal fiscal audit performs its major task to ensure quality of internal controls, but it manages that process now in terms of performance increase. This is one of the tasks of internal fiscal audit. And out of 2 budget remits, the scheme has changed a little bit, so the internal controls now stands below the internal audit. And those guys who used to regulate this, it's not there now. It makes no effect, and it will never make no effect. So there are 3 major tasks for the internal audit. The first is to raise quality and manageability of the internal fiscal control. Secondly, to confirm reporting that the audit is doing. And the third is improvement of quality of fiscal management, including budget spending efficiency. That's one of the elements of the fiscal financial management. So 3 major tasks. Another thing which is there is a handover of authorities for internal audit. Because the internal audit is not possible to organize everywhere. There are 2 options. We can either have a dedicated internal fiscal audit unit, or a person, a dedicated person for that, rather than a unit. What we're trying to do now with the accounts chamber is to define criteria for going in one or the second direction. The situation is a little bit out of balance. There are smaller organizations with a dedicated unit and bigger unit companies with dedicated person. So still, it's not auditors, but all right, Sergey, may I interfere with you, because you're giving so much information on that issue. This is your fair game, but I want to ask Tatiana about the accounts chamber opinion on the internal fiscal control and internal fiscal audit. Given what has been said by Sergey about this institute, I would just say that the effective internal fiscal audit institute as a tool to manage the decision-taking process by a certain public officer, we have not been able to make this. Do we need this tool? I think yes. As we have to shape tools that would in turn shape managerial decisions, and this is the task of an internal fiscal audit. It should prompt a leader to do something, what has been done, how to improve budget spending performance, how to make this institute more effective. This is a regulatory issue, but this is also an HR policy. We ran analysis of subsidiaries or authorized people who have provide those internal fiscal audits in territorial units. And the bottom line is that where this authorized person reports to the head of the executive power directly, if there is a trust between them, the quality of internal fiscal audit is much higher than in any other circumstances. And this is about independence, this is about managerial solutions, and so on. Those changes that have been adopted are to give a new impetus to that institution. I do hope that both federal executive authorities and all stakeholders would benefit from this practice, what they expect and what they want. And what was the baseline for those changes. Thank you, Tatiana. Well, colleagues, your short comments. Go ahead, but very briefly. Hello, my name is Plotnikova from Rosatom State Corporation. My question was, when I was preparing my question, I knew the agenda. It was posted outside, but I got support from 3 panel discussion speakers. I am grateful to Alexei for his standpoint on the conflict of interest, audit and control. I mean, the interests of the Accounts Chamber and the Federal Treasury. I'm very grateful to Tatiana Viktorovna that also was telling on that topic, and Eli Isaev that supported my argumentation. What was my question? The federal standard drafts posted on the Russian Ministry of Finance website say that the internal fiscal audit should be an owner of budget risks and should make the register of those risks. But I think that it's going to be a conflict of interest because the budget procedures whole owner, it's the only unit that knows the risks, and the internal fiscal audit should audit this. What do you think about this? Sergey, can you comment on that very briefly because we are running out of time? Thanks for your question. In terms of methodology, the question is correct. I have no question to your question. Definitely, the classical internal fiscal control and audit system, this is how it should be. The risk owner and audit should see how risks are defined, should streamline those risks, and so on. But, well, colleagues, that's what I started with. For the time being, the system is not classic. We don't have an internal system of control that you are talking about as a representative of one of the major corporations in the country. It's not the internal control that you have, because our internal fiscal control is a procedure within an organization to supervise the budgetary procedure to automate that process, but you mean the control system that are about people who do the internal control, who shape the risk register, who manage those risks. So if we switch to such a system of internal control, then yes. But so far, we can see what we see. There is a consultant or any other employee, he doesn't have time and he doesn't know how to manage risks. And he has a function like he takes 1, 2, 3 step, and he should control himself on the fourth step. He did it. Is there any risk or there is no risk? It's in his system. He should do it anyway. But the internal financial auditor should know that those controls that are there and Mr. Ivanov is doing are sufficient for Ivanov not to make a mistake, for everything to be well. So he supervises the procedure, he breaks it down. I mean, the auditor, you're right, but our internal financial audit includes that internal fiscal control that you're talking about. And the risks are there.
And the last point of our agenda, it's related with the fact that during implementation of our results of control, we still have the same problems related with the fact that in part of implementation of instructions and decrees we face certain difficulties in implementation, and we have already discussed the enforcement measures in the budget, and I would like to address this question to Alexander. In St. Petersburg, which problems do you face when implementing the results of control measures? I wouldn't say there were problems. Yes, there were some difficulties, not problems. I would go back a little bit, Sergei. I would probably disagree that so far it was a bad experience, because to our point of view everything was quite a good thing, it was correct, and it was very important. So our controllers, heads of our controllers, could understand what's happening inside their structures, because previously nobody understood what operations, what procedures are included in this scope. And after implementation of these instructions, everybody knows that Ivanov is responsible for this sphere, the controller is Sidorov, and Petrov is responsible for another operation. It was very obvious, it was very clear and transparent. And this process allowed to personalize the responsibility for each of the operations. From the mental point of view, it was difficult to switch to such performance, and they had this term on internal financial control as a power, as a special power. But when we scheduled everything, we provided glossaries and maps. Everybody understands that. Since we do not have these powers anymore, our responsible people cannot refuse from performing their obligations. First of all, we perform analysis, and if we see high-risk operations with violations, we attempt to inform the head, the responsible person about that, because just to fix a violation and just to register it and forget about that, it's not the right way, because our state financial control is a tool of financial management, without which the quality of financial management cannot be high enough. And all the instructions which we issue do not mean that we need to find somebody, we need just to require money and forget about that. We need to understand why this violation took place, to establish, to determine all the root cause and the problems, or probably system mistake which had an impact on that governmental body. Maybe the same situation exists in other governmental bodies. So the authorities which were not inspected would avoid such a mistake. Monitoring of such violations and tracking what is written in the map of internal financial control allows us to understand the root case on the very initial stage. Another problem, enforcement measures, and the legislation was changed, and we still have an issue of procedure, of adoption, or of prolongation or cancellation. or termination, this probably could be solved on the decision could be made on the level of the entities of the Russian Federation, or maybe there should be change to the code. Mr. Isaev, could you please comment on that problems? In spite of the fact that we do not have much time, almost all the rows in our auditorium are full. That is why probably the topic is interesting. Mechanism of implementation. Now, law number 199 improved implementation of the results of control as instruction regarding instructions and enforcement measures. And I would also say that this law is more flexible from the point of view of approach to the application of response measures for the control subjects. If it's bad or it's good, maybe it's not bad. Will it secure the procedures? Will it secure the return of funds? Yes, to a certain extent, but at the same time there will be another additional operation in order to apply budgetary response measures. It's great that this law cancelled the normative which wasn't valid in the sphere of handing over the powers to the controller bodies. This normative is not included anymore, this regulation, and the non-budgetary funds also could apply budgetary response measures. There is an opportunity to clarify the mistakes which were made by the financial control bodies. Then they sent notification about the enforcement measures. And probably the subject, the most important thing for the subject of the control is an opportunity to submit motivated applications to prolongate the term of execution of instructions. As for disadvantages, we would find a common solution. There are two disadvantages. Number one is lack of opportunity to respond on, for example, non-participants of the budgetary process, and number two is a lack of procedure of prolongation of the term. Criteria should be identified and determined strictly in order to avoid abuse from the part of the officials, in which cases we could prolongate the terms. Thank you very much, Mr. Isaev, dear colleagues. Our agenda is already discussed, and to summarize, I would ask our experts, our speakers, to tell us where we will go, where we are going. Will we change the budget code? What prospects we have on the way of improving our policy? Mr. Isaev offered financial investigation. Other proposals? If you allow me, I would say about prospect. No, financial investigation is not a prospect. Financial investigation is the current situation. Alexander, could you start, please? To continue what I was already saying, I see that the results of our work, of our findings, of our advisory consultancy and our recommendations probably would be reflected in correct managerial decisions by the controllers, by the people who make decisions. In this case, we will avoid violations and the efficiency of budget spendings will be higher. Mr. Isaev, please. I repeat once again, financial investigation is not a prospect for improving the financial governmental control, but a prospect on the condition of having enough resources and access to information, is the presence of maps of risks, increasing involvement of the subjects of control into controlled environment, which will avoid us to prevent all the violations. We controllers should be external auditors. I do not want to abuse the powers of the accounts chamber. We should be an external audits for the subject of control, because we all perform our common state task. If we succeed in that, I would think that being a governmental controller, I made my small contribution into this process. Thank you. Sergey, please. To my point of view, or maybe as a dream, as an objective for the future, the objective is as follows. We very often talk about control, and many colleagues in the audience saw the structure of controlling environment, such a triangle with different levels, different systems of control, accounts chamber on the top, then in the middle federal treasury and regional treasuries, then administration bodies with their own systems of controls, institutional control, internal financial audit, procurement control, other controls, and this triangle is surrounded by arrows which show how it is distributed from top to the bottom. And everybody understands the consequence of activities and what you personally should do in this, and all the results are also accumulated, and the tasks, we have all the information about tasks of control in order to harmonize the efforts of all the participants of this process. So far it's only a picture, it's only an image, and I would like this task to harmonize, to balance, and to provide interaction between all the levels of control, to unite all the efforts. On the one side, they should cover all the tasks, all the objectives that we set in front of the control bodies. On the other side, we need to avoid redundancy in order to make to add harmony to the system. And another important task within the discussion of today, it's a movement towards from internal financial audit to internal audit of every organization, because there is no standard of internal financial audit. And from this point of view, what is financial audit? It's only a part of activities of an organization. That is why if we establish a system of audit to make managerial decisions within the company, it should be the comprehensive audit system which covers all the functions within the organization, because it should be comprehensive, not small financial part of that. Thank you very much, Tatiana. First of all, I would like to wish all of us development and implementation of digital methods of preventive control, non-contact one, so we could see the whole picture, we could understand and manage risks. We should identify these risks, not in a long-term postponed period, but as soon as possible and the more efficient as possible. So we could use these signals in order to form to make managerial decisions in the shortest terms, which would allow us to dynamically change the situation and allow us to have an impact on the achievement, on results, on all these goals and objectives which we set in front of us. It should be painless for the subjects, and also it should attract attention of the subject to any problem. A problem could be different, starting from a small problem to a global problem. This is one part under which we will have an opportunity to manage and to influence and to change the quality of financial management. This is one of the part. And the second part is that we together join our efforts within internal audit and activities of the Federal Treasury and activities of the Accounts Chamber. We could create an efficient institution of financial control, which will allow to achieve the national goals and objectives which we set, and which would be focused on improving quality and level of life of our colleagues, citizens, people for whom we work. This is our main task. Alexei, please. And I would ask you to summarize two things. One is possible, and about the second one, I'm not sure. We can do this year, we can submit to the government the new edition of the budget code. It's enough to do that. It could be unperfect. You have 24 remarks, as far as I know. We will send you a new edition. Probably you will have 44 remarks. All the issues, all the questions about the content are solved, and the Duma approved the first edition. Now we have to finish all the legal and technical part of the job. Two lawyers usually have 4 opinions. That is why we probably could find the wording which would be a compromise for us and send it to lawyers. Otherwise, we will never finish this new edition. We will debate with you, and the control work will not be efficient. Just 2 principal remarks. You are against the replacement of term state control to state budgetary control. We have a very serious justification for that. Budgetary legislation. Why we have financial control, but budgetary legislation, financial sphere is much more expanded, it's much more wider. It can be a body of governmental audit, of state audit, which includes not only finance but also all the other aspects. And the second line of critics, many remarks, why there are many acts, legal acts, more and more of them, because life becomes more complicated. It's impossible to regulate everything by the law. You should give some powers to the to the executive powers. We should add, we change budget code very often. Some people say that you don't need to change the budget code, which means that it's better to conduct this job or this work on the level of the government, because we do not see any risk here. And the Ministry of Finance powers do not grow, they just cover the new areas, the new spheres. And this is possible for us. I believe that the only thing we have to do, we just have a few months for that. Even if we finish this work at the beginning of next year, it's fine. We'll adopt the new edition, we will work better, everything will be understandable, budgetary control, financial control. Yes, and after that we'll prepare the new edition. The problem is not in regulation. As soon as we solve the problem with regulation, we face other problems. To my point of view, the major problem is that the results of controlling activities cannot be registered, especially in the sphere of managerial decisions, what my colleagues were talking about. First of all, we need to understand how many violations revealed are criminal. Maybe they're criminals. They're trying to steal money. And which violation is misunderstanding? Violation of the procedure which doesn't lead to any manage, for example, any comma which shouldn't be there in the text, or something like that. Can anybody provide this analytics? And after that, it will be clear for us that some people are criminals. If people just make mistake because of because of our reasons, it can be corrected, it can be fixed, and we shall avoid the procedural mistakes, because the system needs to be automated, and the system will not allow you to proceed with the next action before you finish the previous action. We can regulate, we can document all the procedures, but we need the result. The budget would not be executed. This is what we shall pay our attention to. And the second point is that we need to adopt a risk-oriented approach in internal control systems. We do not divide it by financial, non-financial. There is internal audit system. If it's good in the ministry and in the organization, which is proved by certain indicators, both internal and external, everybody will be confident that these auditors will not come to this organization, will be just observing from the distance. But if we have these risks, there will be control and monitoring. I believe that these examples, our classical wording that an inspector is coming to us, it should sound more, it should sound happier. I think that you are quite pessimistic about the second part of your presentation, because this is something that we discuss on every platform, on every forum. This is a problem which we will solve, and everybody has an understanding who is studying something and about mistakes and typos. I would like to thank all experts, speakers, and all the participants who took part in this session. See you next year.